Captain Jake Morrison stood at the viewport of his ship, watching the alien station grow larger as they approached. He had made this trip hundreds of times over the past 15 years, but it never got easier. The Galactic Council station looked like a giant crystal flower floating in space, beautiful and cold at the same time. "We're getting close, Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Collins from her seat at the communications console. She was young, only 25, but she had already seen more alien cruelty than most humans would see in their entire lives. "The Council is ready to see you." Jake nodded but did not turn around. He knew what was waiting for him inside that station. The same small, uncomfortable chair in the back corner of the great chamber. The same dismissive looks from alien representatives who thought humans were nothing more than primitive animals. The same polite words that meant nothing followed. By the same refusal to help human colonies in need, it had been this way for 300 years. Ever since humans first met aliens in 2387. At first, humans had been excited. They thought meeting other intelligent life would be wonderful, that they would make friends and learn from each other. Instead, they found a galaxy full of species who looked down on them with disgust. The Zephyrians were tall, thin creatures with blue skin and forearms. They had technology that could move mountains and build cities in days, but they treated humans like children who had just learned to walk. Every time Jake asked for help with a human colony that was struggling, the Zephyrians would smile with their strange mouths and say that humans needed to mature before they could receive. Real assistants, the Vortani, were even worse. They were made of living crystal and thought that anything not made of crystal was inferior. They had taken over dozens of human mining worlds, forcing human families to work in dangerous conditions for almost no pay. When humans complained, the Vortani would simply say that humans should be grateful for the opportunity to serve a superior species. Then there were the Krolix, insect-like creatures who enjoyed causing pain. They had turned several human worlds into testing grounds for their biological weapons, releasing diseases that would kill crops or make people sick. When the Galactic Council asked them to stop, the Krolix would promise to be more careful, then do it again a few months later. Jake remembered the first time he had spoken to the Council 15 years ago. He had been so hopeful then, so sure, that if he could just explain things properly, the aliens would understand that humans deserved better treatment. He had prepared for weeks, gathering evidence of all the terrible things that had happened to human colonies. He had photographs of families forced from their homes, medical reports of diseases deliberately spread by alien weapons, and economic data showing how alien trade policies were destroying human businesses. The Council had listened politely for exactly 10 minutes, then told him his time was up. The Zephyrian representative had patted him on the head like a pet and said that humans would understand these things better when they became more civilized. The other aliens had laughed, sound like breaking glass and buzzing insects. Amy had been keeping records of every meeting, every broken promise, every act of cruelty for the past 5 years. Her files filled 3 computers now, thousands of pages of documented abuse that the Council ignored. Last month, the Drakmari Empire had enslaved 3 entire human colonies, claiming that humans were too primitive to govern themselves. Jake had brought evidence, witness statements, even video recordings of Drakmari's soldiers, forcing human children to work in factories. The Council's response had been to form a committee to study the issue. That committee would report back in 2 years, they said. In the meantime, the 3 human colonies would remain under Drakmari control, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Dr. Richard Stone had tried to explain why the aliens acted this way. He was a scientist who studied alien behavior, and he had spent years trying to understand their thinking. According to his research, most alien species believed that strength could only be shown through immediate violence. When humans chose to talk instead of fight, aliens saw this as proof that humans were weak and cowardly. They think we're afraid of them, Dr. Stone had explained to Jake during their last meeting. In their cultures, if someone hurts you and you don't hurt them back right away, it means you can't fight. They don't understand that we choose not to fight because we think there's a better way. But Jake was starting to wonder if there really was a better way. Every year, more human colonies were destroyed or enslaved. Every year, more human children grew up as second-class citizens in their own galaxy. Every year, Jake sat in that uncomfortable chair and listened to aliens make excuses for why they couldn't help. The worst part was that Jake knew humans could fight if they had to. Human history was full of terrible wars, and humans had learned to be very good at destroying their enemies. But for 3 centuries, humans had chosen a different path. They had decided to be better than their violent past, to solve problems with words instead of weapons. The aliens saw this as weakness, but Jake knew it was actually the greatest strength humanity had ever shown. It took more courage to absorb punishment without fighting back than it did to lash out in anger. It took more wisdom to keep trying for peace, even when peace seemed impossible. But Jake was tired. 15 years of failure had worn him down, and he could see the same exhaustion. In Amy's eyes, in Dr. Stone's research reports, in every human diplomat who had tried to make things better. They were all tired of being treated like animals, tired of watching their people suffer while aliens laughed at their pain as his ship docked with the council station. Jake straightened his uniform and prepared for another day of humiliation. He would sit in his small chair, present his evidence of alien crimes, and listen to polite excuses while humans continued to die. But he would keep trying, because that was what humans did. They endured, they persevered, and they never gave up hope that tomorrow might be better than today. What Jake didn't know was that tomorrow would indeed be different. Not better, but different in a way that would change the galaxy forever. The morning started like any other on New Haven. Children played in the fields while their parents tended to crops that had taken 3 generations to grow properly. The soil had been hard and bitter when the first human settlers arrived, but they had worked it with care and patience until it could feed millions of people. Mary Johnson was hanging laundry outside her farmhouse. When the sky suddenly filled with alien ships, she dropped the wet clothes and ran inside, calling for her husband Tom and their 2 children. Through the kitchen window, she could see massive warships blocking out the sun, their dark holes covered in weapons that could destroy entire cities. "Get the kids to the basement," Tom said, his voice tight with fear. Had served in the Colonial Defense Force years ago and knew what those ships could do. "I'll try to reach the emergency broadcast system," but the aliens were already speaking. Every communication device on New Haven suddenly came alive with the same cold, mechanical voice. The translator made it sound almost human, but Mary could hear the alien contempt underneath the words. "Attention human inhabitants of the territory designated, New Haven. This world has been classified as a strategic resource zone by the hegemony of Talshire. All human life forms must evacuate within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination." Mary felt her blood turn to ice. 72 hours to abandon everything they had built, everything their families had worked for across 3 generations. She looked around their kitchen, at the pictures on the walls showing her grandparents clearing the first fields, on the wooden table Tom had made with his own hands, at the height marks on the doorframe showing how their children had grown. General Patricia Wells received the evacuation order at Colonial Defense Headquarters. She was a tough woman who had spent 30 years protecting human settlements, but she had never faced anything like this. Her entire fleet consisted of 400 patrol ships designed to fight pirates and smugglers, not alien warships that could destroy planets. "How long do we have?" she asked her aide, Lieutenant Bob Carter. 72 hours, General. But our sensors show 50 Talshire dreadnoughts in orbit. Each one has enough firepower to level a continent. Patricia stared at the tactical display. Showing the alien fleet, she had fought impossible odds before, but this was different. The Talshire had not come to negotiate or make demands they might accept. They had come to take New Haven, and they were willing to kill every human on this planet to get it. "Send word to all civilian transports," she ordered. "Start evacuating the population immediately. Prioritize children and families." But even as she gave the order, Patricia knew it was hopeless. New Haven had 2.3 million people spread across 5 continents. There were not enough ships to evacuate everyone in 72 hours. And the Talshire were blocking all the major space routes. Commander Billy Henderson, led the first desperate attempt to break through the alien blockade. His squadron of 20 patrol ships was all that stood between the evacuation transports and 50 enemy dreadnoughts. It should have been suicide, but Billy had a plan. "Remember, we're not trying to win," he told his pilots over the radio. "We're trying to buy time. Hit and run, use the asteroid belt for cover, and make them chase us away from the evacuation routes." The human ships darted between the massive alien vessels like insects around giants. They were too small and fast for the Talsher's heavy weapons to target easily, and Billy used every trick he had learned in 20 years of fighting pirates. His ships would appear from behind an asteroid, fire a few shots at an alien ship's weak points, then disappear before the enemy could respond. For 18 hours, the tiny human fleet kept the Talsher busy while civilian transports loaded families and flew toward safety. Billy lost 6 ships in the fighting, but they saved over 100,000 people. Odd. It was the kind of heroic last stand that humans would normally celebrate, but this time it was not enough. Lisa Parker was a news reporter who had come to New Haven to document the evacuation. She was aboard the passenger liner New Dawn when the Talsher finally lost patience with the human resistance. Through her camera, she watched as one of the alien dreadnoughts turned its main guns toward their ship. "This is Lisa Parker reporting from the New Dawn," she said into her microphone, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. "The Talsher are targeting civilian evacuation ships. I repeat, they are firing on unarmed transports carrying women and children. The alien weapons hit the New Dawn like the fist of an angry god. The passenger liner was built to carry people safely between planets, not to survive military-grade weapons." Lisa's camera kept recording as the ship broke apart around her, as families screamed in terror, as 12,000 innocent people died for the crime of being too slow to abandon their homes. The images spread through human space faster than light itself. On Earth, in the colonies, on space stations, and mining platforms. Humans watched their children murdered by aliens who saw them as nothing more than pests to be cleared away. The footage was horrific, showing pieces of the ship spinning through space while escape pods were systematically destroyed by Talsher fighters. But what happened next was even more terrifying than the massacre itself. Within hours of the New Dawn's destruction, every human world fell completely silent. No diplomatic protests, no appeals to the Galactic Council, no desperate pleas for help. The change was so sudden and complete that alien intelligence services thought there had been a massive communications failure. They were wrong. The communications were working perfectly. Humans were simply done talking. On New Haven, the evacuation continued in eerie silence. Families loaded onto ships without speaking, their faces blank with shock and rage. The Colonial Defense Forces stopped their hit-and-run attacks and seemed to simply vanish. Even General Patricia Wells stopped sending reports to Earth. The Talsher interpreted this as surrender. They had broken human resistance, they thought, and now the evacuation would proceed smoothly. They began making plans to transform New Haven into a pleasure world for their nobility, complete with hunting grounds and luxury resorts, built on the ashes of human dreams. What they did not understand was that humanity's silence was not surrender. It was the moment when 3 centuries of patience finally died, taking with it every restraint that had kept human anger in check. The galaxy was about to learn that some species only appear weak because they choose not to show their true strength. The New Dawn had carried more than 12,000 passengers to their deaths. But in dying, they had given birth to something far more dangerous than any alien empire had ever faced. They had awakened humanity's capacity for total war. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, Admiral Gary Thompson walked through corridors that no alien had ever seen. The tunnels stretched for hundreds of miles, carved out over the past century by machines that worked in complete silence. What the galaxy thought was a simple mining operation was actually the largest military shipyard in known space. Gary stopped at an observation window that looked out into a vast chamber. Inside, thousands of human workers were putting the finishing touches on warships that defied everything aliens thought they knew about human technology. These vessels were sleek and deadly, built with secrets that humanity had been hiding for 300 years. "How many are ready?" Gary asked. His aide, Colonel Steve Williams. 2,000 capital ships, sir. Another 5,000 destroyers and cruisers. The stealth fleet numbers over 10,000 vessels. Steve paused, checking. His tablet, all crews are aboard and waiting for orders. Gary nodded. He had been planning for this moment since he was a young officer, watching human diplomats return from alien meetings with nothing but excuses and broken promises. While those diplomats kept talking, Gary and others like him had been preparing for the day when talking would no longer be enough. The ships in the hidden yards were not built like anything in the known galaxy. Human engineers had studied every piece of alien technology they could find, learning how it worked and, more importantly, how it could be destroyed. The quantum disruption torpedoes could tear through Zephyrian energy shields like paper. Harmonic cannon could shatter Vortana crystal hulls with a single shot. The bioweapons could dissolve Krolyk's armor in seconds. But humanity's greatest advantage was not their weapons. It was their understanding of war itself. While aliens fought for honor and glory, following ancient codes that made their actions predictable, humans had learned to fight for survival. They understood that in a real war, there were no rules, except victory or death. Captain Mary Davis commanded the Ghost Fleet, ships so stealthy that they could hide inside enemy formations without being detected. For decades, her crews had been mapping every alien military base, every trade route, every weakness in their defenses. They had planted listening devices throughout the galaxy, creating a spy network that knew exactly where every enemy ship was at any given moment. We have complete surveillance coverage of all major alien territories, Mary reported during the final briefing. Every Talshire base, every Zephyrian fleet position, every Vortani mining facility. When we move, we'll know exactly where to hit them. Dr. Frank Miller had spent 30 years developing weapons that exploited flaws in alien technology. His laboratory looked like something from a nightmare, filled with devices that could kill in ways aliens had never imagined. The virus bombs could turn alien computer systems against their own users. The neural disruptors could cause massive pain without leaving any physical damage. The quantum mines could make entire fleets simply disappear. Every alien species has weaknesses they don't even know about, Frank explained to the assembled military leaders. The Zephyrians depend completely on their computer networks. Shut those down, and their entire civilization stops working. The Vortani can't function if their crystal matrices are disrupted. Krolyk's become helpless if their chemical communication system is blocked. But the most important part of humanity's preparation had been psychological. While aliens saw humans as weak and primitive, humans had been studying their enemies with the cold calculation of natural predators. They knew exactly how each species would react under pressure. What would make them panic? What would break their will to fight? The transformation began exactly 12 hours after the New Dawn was destroyed. Across human space, civilian ships suddenly revealed hidden weapon systems. Space stations that looked like simple trading posts deployed military-grade shields and sensor arrays. Mining colonies activated defense networks that had been disguised as industrial equipment for decades. On the merchant vessel Lucky Star, Captain Paul Green received the activation signal he had been waiting for his entire career. His ship looked like an ordinary cargo hauler, but hidden behind false bulkheads were enough weapons to destroy a small fleet.
Within minutes,
the Lucky Star became a military cruiser capable of taking on any alien warship. Similar transformations were happening everywhere humans lived. The seemingly helpless territories that aliens had been exploiting for centuries suddenly became heavily fortified strongholds. Every human settlement revealed that it had been preparing for war while pretending to be defenseless. The aliens monitoring. Human space noticed the changes, but did not understand what they meant. The Talshire Command assumed it was some kind of defensive panic after the New Haven incident. Zephyrians thought humans were finally showing their true primitive nature. The Vortani believed it was proof that humans could not be trusted. With advanced technology, none of them realized that they were looking at the most sophisticated military deception in galactic history. For 3 centuries, humanity had been playing the role of helpless victims while secretly building the most powerful war machine the galaxy had ever seen in his command center on the moon. Admiral Gary Thompson watched status reports flowing in from across human space. Every ship was in position. Every weapon system was armed. Every target had been identified and marked for destruction. The alien species that had spent so many years laughing at human weakness were about to discover what human strength really looked like. "All forces report ready, sir," Colonel Steve Williams announced. Gary looked at the tactical display showing alien positions throughout the galaxy. Thousands of enemy ships were scattered across dozens of star systems, confident in their superiority and completely unprepared for what was coming. They had murdered 12,000 innocent people on the new dawn, thinking it would terrify humans into complete submission. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping for 300 years. Human patience had been their gift to the galaxy, a deliberate choice to seek peace instead of war. But that gift had been rejected with violence and cruelty, and now the galaxy would face the consequences. "Signal all commands," Gary ordered. Operation Reckoning is authorized. Show them what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. Across human space, 10,000 hidden warships began to move toward their targets. The galaxy's long nightmare was about to begin, and this time, humans would not be the victims. Ambassador Kevin Brown walked through the corridors of the Zephyrian embassy one last time. He had spent 10 years in this place, listening to alien officials make excuses for why they could not help human colonies. Today he was leaving forever, and he would not be coming back. "Pack everything," he told his staff. "We leave in 1 hour." The Zephyrian ambassador Velter Quinox appeared in the hallway. His forearms moved in what humans had learned was a gesture of confusion. "Ambassador Brown, surely there is no need for such haste. The council meeting about the New Haven incident is scheduled for next week." Kevin stopped walking and looked at the tall blue alien. For 10 years, he had been polite to this creature who saw humans as amusing pets. Today, politeness was no longer necessary. "There will be no more meetings," Kevin said quietly. "Humanity is done talking." Beltar's strange laugh sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Come now, Ambassador. Surely you don't expect the Council to take human threats seriously. Your species has never shown any real strength." Kevin smiled, and something in that smile made the aliens step backward. "You're about to learn how wrong you are." Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as human ambassadors packed their belongings and prepared to leave alien space. The withdrawal was so sudden and complete that alien intelligence services scrambled to understand what was happening. Most assumed it was fear after the New Haven massacre. They were wrong. 3 days later, the Talshire fleet that had destroyed the New Dawn was patrolling their newly claimed territory when they simply vanished. All 50 warships went silent. At exactly the same moment, their final transmissions cutting off mid-sentence. The Talshire High Command waited for status reports that never came. Admiral Kethfer, leader of the Talshire War Fleet, had been giving orders to his bridge crew when the first human torpedo struck his flagship. The weapon passed through their shields as if they did not exist, tearing into the ship's power core. As alarms screamed around him, Kethfer had just enough time to realize that his shields were not malfunctioning. The human weapon was simply using technology that made their defenses useless. The destruction was swift and silent. Human stealth ships appeared inside the Talshire formation, fired their weapons, and disappeared before the aliens could even see what had attacked them. Within 14 minutes, the most powerful battle fleet in Talshire, history was nothing but glowing debris drifting through space, Captain. Susan Miller commanded the human attack force that appeared over the Talshire homeworld the next day. Her fleet of 200 ships materialized without warning, having traveled through hyperspace routes that alien sensors could not detect. The Talshire orbital defenses opened fire immediately, launching thousands of missiles and energy beams. At the human vessels, none of their weapons found their targets. The human ships moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing at will. Their return fire was devastating, each shot precisely aimed at critical systems. Within minutes, every Talshire military installation in the system was destroyed or disabled. "This is Captain Miller of the Human Defense Force," Suzanne broadcast on all frequencies. "The Talshire government has exactly 1 hour to surrender unconditionally and agree to pay full reparations for the murder of 12,000 innocent civilians. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. The Talshar. Leadership tried to contact their other fleets, but found that their communications were being jammed by human technology they did not understand. They attempted to negotiate, offering to discuss terms and find a peaceful solution. The human response was immediate and final. Every Talshar colony world lost its main power grid in synchronized attacks that lasted less than an hour. Fusion. Plants, solar collectors, and power distribution networks were destroyed with surgical precision, leaving billions of aliens in darkness. The attacks were so perfectly coordinated that Talshar military analysts realized they were facing an enemy that had been watching them for years, mapping every critical system and vulnerability. The psychological impact was devastating. Talshar had built their entire culture around the idea that they were the galaxy's supreme military power. Their warriors trained for centuries to pilot their massive dreadnoughts, and their nobility took pride in conquering weaker species. To be defeated so easily by humans, whom they had considered barely more intelligent than animals, shattered their sense of identity. General Vorthak, supreme commander of all Talshar forces, sat in his darkened command center and tried to understand what had happened. His fleets were destroyed, his colonies were powerless, his people were begging him to surrender before the humans decided to finish what they had started. How did they do this? He asked his aide, Colonel Reshtar. Istar. Intelligence reports said humans had no significant military capability. Our intelligence was wrong, sir, Reshtar replied, his voice hollow with shock. The humans have been deceiving us for centuries. They're not primitive at all. They're more advanced than us, and they've been preparing for this war since first contact. The surrender came within a week. The proud Talshar Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years, agreed to every human demand without condition. It would pay massive reparations, publicly apologize for their crimes, and accept human oversight of their military forces. The alternative was the complete annihilation of their species. News of the Talshar defeat spread through alien space faster than any previous galactic event. Species that had spent centuries dismissing humanity as irrelevant suddenly realized they were facing an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, disappear before retaliation was possible. The Zephyrian Empire called an emergency session of their High Council. For the first time in their recorded history, they were afraid. If humans could destroy the Talshar so easily, what could they do to other alien species who had mistreated human colonies? The Vortani Mining Consortium began evacuating their forces from human territories without being asked. Their crystal-based technology, which they had always considered superior to anything humans could build, had proven useless against human weapons that could disrupt their molecular structure. Even the Krolix, who had never feared any enemy, were reconsidering their policy of using human worlds as testing grounds for biological weapons. Reports from their spy networks described human ships that could travel undetected through any defense system, and human weapons that could kill in ways that defied all known science. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted in a matter of days. Species that had ruled for millennia suddenly found themselves wondering if humanity would come for them next, and whether their own military forces could do any better than the Talshar had done. The answer, as they would soon discover, was no. Admiral Nancy Clark walked into the great chamber of the Galactic Council for the first time in her life. Unlike the human ambassadors who had come before her, she did not take the small, uncomfortable seat in the back corner. Instead, she walked straight to the center of the room where the most powerful alien leaders sat. "That seat is reserved for the Zephyrian High Chancellor," said Veltar Quinox nervously. His forearms trembled as he spoke. Nancy looked at him with cold eyes. Not anymore. She sat down in the ornate chair that had been the symbol of alien superiority for 300 years. Round the chamber, representatives from dozens of species watched in stunned silence. 6 months ago, they would have laughed at a human who dared to sit in that place. Today, none of them dared to object. The galaxy had changed completely in those 6 months. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled over thousands of worlds for millennia, lost 80% of their fleet in a single day when human computer viruses infected their networks. Their own ships turned against each other in battles that lasted only minutes. The proud Zephyrian military never fired a shot at human forces. Commander Danwright had led the cyber attack from a hidden base in the asteroid belt. His team of computer specialists had spent years learning how Zephyrian technology worked, finding weaknesses that the aliens never knew existed. When the order came to attack, Dan's viruses spread through Zephyrian networks faster than their technicians could respond. Their whole civilization runs on interconnected computer systems. Don explained to his team as they watched Zephyrian ships destroying each other on their screens. Cut the connections, reverse the programming, and they become helpless. Built their technology to be efficient, not secure. The Vortani mining operation collapsed just as quickly when human sonic weapons made their crystal technology useless. Captain Ray Murphy had discovered that certain sound frequencies could disrupt the molecular bonds that held Vortani crystal together. A few targeted broadcasts turned their mighty crystal ships into harmless dust floating in space. The Krolix, biological weapons that had terrorized human colonies for decades, proved useless against diseases that humanity had developed specifically to target insectoid physiology. Dr. Lisa Martin had spent 20 years studying Krolix biology, learning exactly how their immune systems worked. When human bioweapons were released into Krolix territory, the insect warriors who had once seemed invincible died by the millions, but humanity did not stop with military victory. They wanted complete submission from every species that had oppressed human colonies. The Drakmari Empire, which had enslaved 3 human worlds, found their entire trade network shut down when human ships began intercepting every cargo vessel. Within weeks, their economy collapsed and their government begged for mercy. Colonel Tony White established the new enforcement protocols that would govern the post-war galaxy. Any act of aggression against human interests would result in immediate retaliation with overwhelming force. Species that had committed crimes against human civilians would face trials conducted under human law, with punishments decided by human judges. The old rules are finished, Tony announced during a broadcast that reached every inhabited world in the galaxy. For 3 centuries, you treated us like animals while demanding we follow your codes of honor. Those codes protected you well. You murdered our children and enslaved our people. Today, we follow only one rule. Any species that threatens humanity will be destroyed. The trials began immediately. Alien leaders who had ordered attacks on human colonies were brought before human courts and forced to answer for their crimes. The Talshir generals who had destroyed the New Dawn were executed publicly, their deaths broadcast throughout the galaxy as a warning to others. Dr. Helen Green designed the framework for the new galactic government. The old council system, where alien species had made decisions about human lives without human input, was completely disbanded. In its place, humanity established a colonial administration that treated alien species the way they had once treated humans. Every alien world will be governed by a human administrator, Helen explained to the assembled alien representatives. You will be allowed to maintain your local customs and traditions, but all major decisions will be made by human authorities. Any resistance to human rule will be met with immediate military intervention. The transformation was so complete that many young aliens grew up believing humans had always been the dominant species in the galaxy. The old stories of human weakness became forbidden history that could only be whispered in secret. Alien schools taught their children to respect and obey human authorities without question. Ambassador Julia Stone, who replaced Kevin Brown as humanity's chief diplomatic representative, established the new relationship between humans and aliens. There would be no more negotiations between equals, no more committees to study human grievances, no more polite excuses for why alien crimes could not be punished. You had 3 centuries to treat us with basic decency, Julia told the assembled alien leaders during her first official address. You chose cruelty instead. Now you will live under our rules, and you will learn what it means to be the weaker species in a galaxy controlled by your superiors. The aliens who had once laughed at human diplomats now competed desperately for human approval. Species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years sent tribute to Earth, hoping to avoid the fate that had befallen the Talshir and others who had resisted human authority, but the most profound change was not political or military. It was the complete reversal of how the galaxy understood strength and weakness. For 3 centuries, aliens had believed that humanity's patience proved they were cowards. Now they understood that patience had been humanity's greatest weapon, allowing them to prepare for war while their enemies grew complacent. The old galaxy, where might made right and the strong preyed on the weak, was gone forever. In its place was a new order where humanity's word was law and alien. Species existed only because humans allowed them to exist. The lesson was simple and terrifying. Some species appear weak only because they choose restraint over violence. That choice is finally taken away. The result is not weakness revealed, but strength unleashed without mercy or limitation. No species would ever forget the moment humanity's patience finally snapped, because that moment had changed the galaxy forever.